Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a story that has left military experts across Europe speechless and the United Kingdom completely stunned. Ukraine's use of the British Challenger 2 tanks has been nothing short of pure genius, a masterclass in adaptation, creativity, and strategy under extreme pressure. What was once thought to be a symbolic gesture of Western support has turned into one of the most effective battlefield innovations of this war. Ukraine hasn't just used these tanks, they've redefined how they're operated, maintained, and integrated into modern warfare. This isn't just a success story about a weapon, it's a story about intelligence, improvisation, and a nation that refuses to lose. When the UK first announced it would send Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine, many analysts were skeptical. They called it a political move, more about optics than impact. The Challenger 2, while powerful, is a heavy machine, a Cold War-era tank designed for open battlefields, not muddy front lines and drone-infested skies. Many wondered how Ukraine could even maintain such complex vehicles, given that spare parts, training, and logistics were major challenges, but Ukraine proved everyone wrong. Instead of treating the tanks as fragile Western gifts, they turned them into adaptable assets, customizing and deploying them in ways that even surprised British engineers. At first, the Challenger 2s were kept away from the heaviest fighting, mainly used for defensive positions or as precision strike platforms, but soon, Ukrainian tank crews began to experiment. They started using these tanks in combined drone operations, pairing them with reconnaissance drones to identify enemy armor and artillery before moving into position. Instead of charging head-on, they used the tank's superior fire control system to strike from hidden positions with devastating accuracy. By coordinating every movement with aerial intelligence, Ukraine turned the Challenger from a blunt instrument into a precision weapon. This wasn't how the British Army envisioned it being used, but it worked flawlessly. Reports from the front lines described Challenger tanks engaging Russian targets at distances exceeding anything Russian armor could match. The gun's stability, range, and accuracy made it ideal for ambush tactics. Ukrainian crews learned how to exploit the tank's strengths while minimizing exposure to drones and artillery. They used camouflage, decoys, and rapid redeployment tactics to confuse Russian reconnaissance. In one operation, Ukrainian forces placed fake heat signatures and dummy tanks made of scrap metal and thermal blankets to lure Russian drones, while the real Challengers repositioned to deliver accurate, devastating counterstrikes. This kind of battlefield trickery reminded many experts of classic World War II deception tactics, but updated for the drone age. British military advisors were reportedly astonished when they saw the data and combat footage. Ukraine wasn't just operating the tanks correctly, they were operating them better than most NATO crews had in decades of exercises. The Challenger 2 was designed for large-scale tank-on-tank warfare, but Ukraine transformed it into a sniper tank, precise, stealthy, and lethal. The tank's incredible optics and advanced armor made it perfect for long-range engagements, while Ukraine's innovative tactics eliminated the risks of being pinned down or surrounded. Another part of Ukraine's genius was logistical. Instead of waiting for Western technicians to handle maintenance, Ukraine trained its own engineers and mechanics to service the tanks under field conditions. British instructors were amazed at how quickly Ukrainian crews mastered complex systems. Within weeks, they were performing maintenance that normally takes NATO crews months to learn. They even began modifying the tanks using local components, improvising parts, and adding extra armor plating made from salvaged materials. This ability to adapt technology in real time turned Ukraine's Challengers into hybrid beasts, part British engineering, part Ukrainian ingenuity. Then came the psychological aspect. Russia had long considered the appearance of Western tanks a red line, a sign of direct NATO involvement. But Ukraine used that perception to its advantage. The very sight of a Challenger on the battlefield created panic among Russian troops. Russian social media channels filled with fear-driven speculation claiming that these tanks were invincible. Ukrainian forces deliberately leaked images and videos showing the tanks in action, striking fear and confusion into enemy ranks. Even when the tanks weren't there, rumors of their presence forced Russian units to change routes, slow advances, and waste ammunition firing at decoys. This psychological warfare element became as powerful as the tanks themselves. Ukrainian commanders knew how to manipulate information, blending truth, deception, and propaganda into one cohesive strategy. They let the Russians think the challengers were everywhere, when in reality there were only a few. This created a situation where perception became reality, and morale began to crumble on the Russian side. For a military built on rigid structure and centralized control, fear and uncertainty are poison. Ukraine weaponized that fear. Meanwhile, the UK reaction to all this was one of astonishment. British defense officials received battlefield feedback showing not just the effectiveness of the tanks, but also the new tactics that Ukrainian crews had developed. They were seeing their own tanks being used in ways that British doctrine never imagined. Some British officers reportedly described Ukraine's tactics as revolutionary, calling them a glimpse of future warfare. The Challenger, which many believed was outdated, suddenly became a symbol of adaptability and success. The UK Ministry of Defence even began studying Ukraine's methods to update their own tank warfare doctrines. Another key part of this success is how Ukraine combined Western and Soviet technology. Most of Ukraine's armored forces still rely on older Soviet designs like the T-64 and T-72. Integrating the Challenger 2 into this ecosystem wasn't easy, but Ukraine managed to do it seamlessly. They built hybrid battalions that mixed Western and Eastern vehicles, using each where it was strongest. Challengers became the anchor, a defensive backbone that provided cover and long-range firepower, while lighter, faster tanks handled flanking and reconnaissance. This blending of old and new made Ukraine's armored units unpredictable and flexible. What's even more remarkable is how Ukraine adapted its supply chains. Normally, maintaining tanks like the Challenger requires a constant flow of specialized parts from the UK, but Ukraine didn't have that luxury. Instead, they built domestic repair hubs capable of producing compatible components. Engineers used 3D printing technology to replicate small parts, and local factories modified tools to handle British specifications. What began as a logistical nightmare turned into a showcase of resilience and technical skill. British officials admitted that Ukraine's improvisation was beyond expectation. Then there's the drone connection, a true game changer. Ukraine's drone operators and tank crews now work in near-perfect coordination. Drones scout targets, feed live data to tank units, and even provide laser guidance for precision shots. In some cases, Ukraine used drones to drop smoke grenades or decoys to conceal tank movements. The synchronization between ground and air assets has made Ukraine's armored attacks far more effective than traditional tank charges. It's modern warfare at its finest, fast, smart, and tech-driven. The UK astonishment didn't stop there. When British analysts reviewed footage of the Challenger's combat performance, they found evidence of extreme precision under fire. Ukrainian crews were hitting moving targets at distances once thought impossible under combat conditions. Their ability to adapt and remain calm under drone and artillery threat impressed even veteran British commanders. This wasn't just skill, it was battlefield instinct, honed through 2 years of relentless fighting. But perhaps the most impressive aspect is the mindset behind all this. Ukraine doesn't see these tanks as sacred or irreplaceable. They see them as tools, valuable, yes, but meant to be used. They're not afraid to push the limits of what the Challenger can do. British tank crews are often trained to follow strict protocols, but Ukrainians have the freedom to experiment, and that freedom has produced extraordinary results. They've tested new firing angles, unorthodox camouflage patterns, and even custom built drone communication links directly mounted onto the tank's systems. It's the kind of battlefield creativity that can't be taught in a classroom. The UK government has been so impressed that it's reportedly sharing Ukraine's tactical insights with NATO allies. These lessons could influence the next generation of armored warfare strategy. The idea that a smaller, embattled nation could innovate faster than established militaries is reshaping how the West views modern conflict. Ukraine has shown that agility, not just technology, wins wars. And that's why the Challenger 2 has gone from a symbol of British pride to a symbol of Ukrainian ingenuity. Even Russia has taken notice. Russian commanders have begun adjusting tactics, using more drones and precision artillery to counter Ukraine's new methods. But Ukraine stays one step ahead, constantly evolving. Every battle becomes a laboratory of innovation. What worked yesterday might change tomorrow, and that's exactly why Russia struggles to keep up. The war has turned into a contest between rigidity and flexibility, and Ukraine's creative mindset keeps it in the lead. In recent months, Ukrainian tank units have started integrating AI-assisted systems to process drone data faster. This means tank commanders can receive real-time updates on enemy positions within seconds. Some reports even suggest that Ukraine has developed software linking tank sensors to drone networks, creating a shared battlefield awareness system. The UK and other NATO countries are now studying this approach for their own modernization programs. What began as an emergency adaptation might soon become a standard for Western militaries. The Challenger 2's role in Ukraine has also changed the public perception of tanks worldwide. For years, analysts claimed that drones and missiles had made tanks obsolete, but Ukraine has proven that with the right strategy, tanks remain essential. They're not invulnerable, but they're adaptable. Combined with technology, they can still dominate the battlefield. Ukraine's success with the Challenger 2 has breathed new life into armored warfare doctrine. The British media has followed this story closely, praising Ukrainian bravery and intelligence. Commentators have called Ukraine's use of the Challenger a masterstroke of tactical innovation. Some military historians even compare it to the revolutionary use of tanks in World War I, a leap forward that redefined warfare. The difference is that now, innovation comes not from generals in offices, but from soldiers in the field. Every Ukrainian crewman is part engineer, part strategist, part survivor. At the heart of it all is Ukraine's refusal to give up. Despite limited resources, constant bombardment, and immense pressure, they keep finding ways to outthink a much larger enemy. The Challenger 2 became more than a weapon, it became a symbol of determination, intelligence, and partnership. The UK may have provided the hardware, but Ukraine provided the genius that made it matter. Every tank that rolls into battle carries not just steel and firepower, but also the spirit of innovation that defines this war. As the conflict continues, the Challenger's story is far from over. New tactics are emerging every week, and Ukraine continues to push the boundaries of what's possible. British defense experts now view Ukraine not just as a recipient of aid, but as a teacher, a living laboratory of modern warfare lessons. It's a rare moment in history when a nation under siege becomes the global standard for creativity and resilience. In the end, Ukraine's Challenger tank strategy isn't just about machinery. It's about the human mind, the capacity to adapt, innovate, and overcome. It's proof that intelligence and courage can turn even the most conventional weapon into something extraordinary. The UK may have built the Challenger, but Ukraine showed the world how to truly use it. And that's why this story will be remembered not just as a chapter in this war, but as a turning point in how the world fights wars in the future. If you found this analysis insightful, stay tuned for more deep dives into the strategies reshaping modern warfare. Ukraine's example reminds us that even in the darkest times, brilliance can emerge from necessity, and genius can change the course of history.